testing the waters and seeing how it goes later on. But yeah, those watts per kilo she was holding too was pretty impressive for that move as well.
Absolutely outstanding. And she does spend a fair bit of time on this format because she's not the youngest of the riders in the race. I think she might actually be 40 years of age, Justine Barrow. She works full-time as a physiotherapist, so she needs to be really efficient with the use of her time. Another rider that we're seeing up towards the front is also Bree Vine. We haven't had her light up just as yet in terms of collecting her data, but she's a rider that you think could be quite a chance, and she's one that you're looking forward to seeing in action.
Yeah, she races a lot. I saw just on Thursday night she was racing the chop in A grade, which not many women get to A grade in the chop because it's a pretty solid race. And her husband was also racing in that same grade and normally takes it out. So she definitely is very familiar with these circuits and when to use each power up, and a really strong Swift racer. So I think that would be in her benefit, and she would be timing her use of matches and when to make those moves accordingly.
So we've got around about 20 kilometres to go at this point. They've covered 11 Ks. This is a 31.9 kilometre race, 16 laps around the course. For those of you tuning in for the first time, just joining us, this is the opening round in 6 rounds of the National Road Series. It will be on every fortnight on this platform, and you can tune in live. And this has been a great initiative by both Cycling Australia and also Zwift to get racing on throughout what has been an extraordinary 2020. I'm Matthew Keenan, joined by Carly Taylor, who has ridden the National Road Series in the past. But Carly, when you rode the National Road Series, it was vastly different to what we see now. And there were no teams. It was really just a bunch of individuals getting out there and going head to head and trying to take the next step in the sport.
Yeah, it has improved a lot since our last race. I think in the NRS it might have been in onwards of 10 years ago now. So it's great to see that progression of the sport and women's cycling in Australia, and to see so many teams here today and 62 odd riders racing this first round of the National Racing Series on Zwift has been awesome. So yeah, I think that we're in for a really good block of racing.
This is just the opening round, and we've got 45 kilometres per hour as we're heading down the back part of the course. Taryn Heather, who we're now on board with the Suzuki team. I think Taryn Heather's riding for, but she's a rider with plenty of experience, and she's a rider that we've seen a lot of for a long time, and it's good to see her still racing and sharing her experience with some of her young teammates.
Yeah, and we're also on the rider of Vicky Whitelaw at the moment, who she used to actually be my teammate back in the AIS days a while ago, where she was a really strong rider and represented Australia at World Championships and won the time trial in the Giro. And after retirement, she's now turned to a bit of Swift racing. And yeah, she races a lot of the Pro-Am events on our Swift platform as well. So is another avid and experienced Swifter that with 9 teammates in the race too, it makes Sydney Uni Staminate a really strong team this morning.
Yeah, it's an awesome team. I just need to go to Corrections Corner to correct myself. Taryn Heather, I should say, riding for the Specialised women's team, not the Step Forward Suzuki team, which is a team that Bree Vine rides for. The team that you did mention a minute ago, the Sydney Uni Staminate team, 10 riders on the start line. Vicky Whitelaw, as you said, part of that team. This is a team that had on their squad last year Jessica Pratt, who ended up winning the Zwift Academy to go on to ride for the Canyon SRAM team. And that has been a fantastic initiative to give somebody an opportunity to step up to one of the World Tour teams. And we also saw the Kiwi, Ella Harris. She achieved that last year. She was the winner of that academy in 2018. And then in 2020, riding for the New Zealand national team, she rode the Herald Sun Tour this year. And her win to the top of Falls Creek this year, given the lack of racing we've had so far this year, Carly, it might go down as one of the best victories of the season.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome to watch. She got dropped a couple of times and kept fighting and coming back. And then I think she surprised herself when she crossed over that line first. But it was probably her reaction that I think everyone loved most, when she was just so in shock and so emotional. But it's awesome to see how much it means to the riders, a victory like that, and to show that the Swift Academy, how it is a really amazing platform to identify this up and coming talent. And yeah, obviously to have a New Zealand and an Australian win the last couple of years, it's been great for us in the Southern Hemisphere. And yeah, hopefully it just kind of highlights how this is another way of potentially getting that pro contract to a lot of these NRS riders that might be wanting to take that next step.
Yeah, it has been a fantastic initiative. We're now on board with Vicky Whitelaw, and has been a heart rate of 174 beats per minute. That's pretty high, but I think Vicky Whitelaw has probably got a few more beats in her before she hits the red zone. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, she's probably sitting at the moment around her threshold, so she knows she'll be able to hold this for quite a while. And yeah, she has only just last year, she actually won the national E-Crit that we had in Ballarat. So she's really experienced in knowing the amount of effort required at certain parts of the race. And I definitely think she has more in the tank, and she's just now just setting that pace. So when she does make a move, it hurts everyone else that little bit more.
Well, also tuning in, those amongst you that are watching, Pat Shaw's tuning in, watching the women's race. He'll be joining me at 10 o'clock for the men's race. And no doubt those who are competing in the men's race will be warming up. And Carly, just like in the women's race, we've got huge numbers in both of those events. And one of the big advantages of this platform is it makes it more cost effective for a lot of riders to be able to test themselves against the best in Australian cycling. We do have two juniors in this race. I haven't noted them still being able to survive in this front group. That's no big surprise, both Neve Bradbury and Francesca Sewell. But it's a really good measuring stick to work out how much work I need to do to close the gap between where I'm at now and where I need to be.
Yeah, and I think like it's when you haven't raced as well and on this platform, it is a bit of a shock to the system sometimes with just how hard that intensity is. But it is great to see them just having a go, and like you said, having that measuring stick of exactly how far they have maybe to come. But a lot of these riders too are in teams that have those more experienced riders helping them and guiding them. And so they've got that support network there, which is really great. And the bunch now too, it's not just those juniors losing positions and contact, but a lot of people have lost contact now. As you can see that the bunch has dwindled down quite a bit after 20 minutes of racing. They're about halfway now into the race, and it's been quite a solid start. As you're seeing, Vicky's heart rate just slowly climbing as well, but sitting over 300 watts and about 5.5 watts per kilo means she's not exactly going easy.
It's been like this right from the very start, and I've never actually ridden a Zwift race. I've done quite a few group rides on Zwift, and everybody that I've spoken to about racing on Zwift, they've mentioned how difficult it is at the start. Really similar to the start of a mountain bike race or a cyclocross race in terms of that intensity and that fight for the front. And just to make sure that you don't miss any sort of splits, because once you're out the back on your own, as we're seeing one rider getting slightly distanced, it's really difficult to close a gap by yourself.
Yeah, and it looks like Anna Booth there is just losing a little bit of ground. She rides for that Sydney Uni Staminade, who have 10 riders in this race. So really probably trying to just bridge across now. She'll have a little bit of a descent, which might give her a chance to hop on before they start those numerous corners. And that's probably the time where if you're going to get on, you're going to get on now. Otherwise, you probably won't. So hopefully she does bridge that gap. But yeah, definitely, I think I've never finished I always finish a Swift race probably more buckled, and I've used so much more effort than maybe what I ever did in a normal race. So it's a really good hit out. and a way to keep that racing fitness too in a time where, unfortunately, there isn't really any other alternative in the real world.
Well, don't laugh at me here, Carly, but a couple of times when I've been on a group ride that hasn't been a non-drop group ride, it's been a proper, you've got to fend for yourself and try and keep up ride. When I've been on the ropes and I'm trying to get back on or stay in the group, I've found myself trying to get more aerodynamic in the garage. And it hasn't helped.
I find myself just trying to find a power-up, just using the power-ups.
I need to get on board with the power-ups. Well, Matilda Reynolds has managed to keep herself up towards the front. We're on board with her at the moment. Going reasonably well, still sitting at around about that 160 beats per minute. In fact, we were on board with Matilda Reynolds a little earlier on, and she was up around the 170 beats per minute mark. So her heart rate has actually dropped. She's settled into the rhythm, and Matilda Reynolds, she's looking good. And as you just saw from the graphic that popped up on the screen, she's only just getting started. She was the winner of the Melbourne to Warrnambool last year, but this is a big move, Carly Taylor.
Yeah, it looks like a rider from the Subaru Giant racing team using that power up to make a move off the front on the hill of the climb. And they've got a really good gap. It looks like maybe it's a couple of seconds, I think 5-second gap.
This is Bree Playell who's opened up the gap. She used that power up. She went to around about the 8.5 watts per kilo. She's now settled back down to around about the 5 watts per kilo, but she's definitely gone into the red zone, and this is going to be super difficult for her to be able to hold on to that sort of rhythm. But she's going well. Her heart rate is 199 beats per minute. That is through the roof.
Yeah, and it looks like there's a couple of riders trying to chase her, but she's got about 6 seconds on that small group that are trying to bridge the gap. And yeah, 200 watts, 200 beats per minute now. This is an all-out effort for her at that 20-kilometre mark. So just about 11 kilometres left in the bike race, and this is a really good move by her. Georgia Whitehouse, it looks like a few have.
Yeah, they're trying to do the chasing, but this is outrageous heart rate. Up at the 200 beat per minute, that is phenomenal. I almost find myself engaging the inner darts commentator. Instead of making the big call of 180, we're going for a heart rate of 202. These are enormous numbers by Bree Player off the front. She is flying along. It's still holding on to a little bit of a gap, but she's about to be reeled back in. I think it's all over. It's a bold move, though. I like it. And it could cause a reaction from the peloton in terms of somebody else figuring, well, I can't go toe-to-toe with the likes of Matilda Reynolds in a sprint, so I'll launch the next attack.
Yeah, and you're seeing a lot of the Sydney Uni Staminade riders up there, up the front. Georgia Whitehouse did a lot of work there to help bring it back. So it would have also spent a lot of energy from her as well. But Justine Barrow as well, right up there. So all the main favourites are now really making sure that they're up close to the front as they start to head to the climb for another lap. So it'll be interesting to see if someone makes a move this time round and almost counters attack that. So they're just hitting the climb now. And you start seeing people using their power-ups.
Plenty of those orangey-looking Zwift jerseys from the Subaru Giant racing team up towards the front. They look to be going pretty well. Good numbers towards the front of the race. Georgia Whitehouse, who are on board with now, she's putting the pressure on. Almost 21 kilometres having been covered, and they're lapping some of the riders who have been left behind. So this is just like the real world. I love this, Carly Taylor. They're lapping riders who have been dropped. And Vicky Whitelaw is moving through towards the front.
Yeah, it looks like Vicky went to the front and straight past that group that they just passed. And with a 1.9 kilometre circuit, it is a short circuit. And now they're just using those power-ups to get a bit of a boost going down that hill in the fastest part of the race, where they're hitting speeds of around 55 kilometres an hour.
Well, they come through to complete another lap. They're down to 10 kilometres to go, just over 10 Ks to go. So just make it 5 or 6 laps still remain in the race. We're on board with Vicky Whitelaw once again. One of the most experienced riders in this race. She's got plenty of international experience, as you mentioned a couple of moments ago, Carly Taylor. And she's really enjoyed sharing that with some of the younger riders on her team. Bree Wilson for Rock Salt Attacker. We're on board with her now as well.
Yeah, I saw a tweet from Vicky Whitelaw yesterday saying that every rider of their team is actually racing today. So that's why they have a start list of 10. And she does do a lot of coaching, but helping all of those, the younger and the new generation starting to come through. And she's used that experience so much to help the team grow. And it's awesome to see her on the start list and making an impact in this race. Bree Wilson too, last year in the SRAM Send It series, took out the series, and that's almost how Rock Salt Attacker identified her and got her in on the team last year. And she had a really strong nationals as well, climbing really well in Ballarat. And yeah, they've got a really strong team here.
Well, there's no doubt that there's plenty of riders that are aware of people like Bree Wilson and that performance last year in the Send It series of catching the attention of a few of the other teams. And we saw last weekend, as we had the Anzac Classic, we had people like Henk Vogels was watching with the team out of the Sunshine Coast and just taking a look and keeping an eye on various people. There were other sports directors and team owners, they were watching, keeping a close eye as well. And there's no question that in many of the races and events that have been held on Zwift throughout this period with the coronavirus, the big teams are also watching, because there'll be athletes that they've been keeping an eye on, checking on their results, and now they'll be seeing, okay, well, what work are they doing throughout this lockdown period, and how self-motivated are they? Can they keep themselves going without the races and with uncertainty? Because that tells a lot about the character of an athlete.
Yeah, it is a really great talent identification platform, I think. And just before you saw Bree Vine make a move, one of the riders that I thought might have a go early in the race. And then Taryn Heather looks like she might have just countered that move as well. So it's definitely getting exciting now with about 6 kilometers left. So yeah, a lot of them now are using those power-ups every single lap. You're seeing on the hill, everyone's dropping those lightweight or aero boosts. And yeah, also Sydney Uni Staminates, so many riders up there yet again, up at the front of the peloton.
And Georgia Whitehouse, another one that we've seen regularly. This is another group that is being lapped as the leaders just charge on through. Georgia Whitehouse, we've featured her quite regularly on the screen because, quite simply, she's regularly been up towards the front. 300 watts, 180 beats per minute, powering away at the front of the race. And you can see a lot of the riders that have got the green B marked to their name. Carly, there's a lot of riders with the green B marked to their name, and then you've got the orange A marked to their name. And those that are more than a lap behind, you can see the big time gap that is next to their name as well, to try and clarify who's at the front of the race. And certainly Georgia Whitehouse, she is at the front of the race, and she has been right since the very start. And behind her, no surprise, is Vicky Whitelaw.
Yeah, and they're just hitting the climb again, and a lot of those power-ups are being used. The lightweight power-ups, which reduce your weight for 15 seconds, and some using the draft boost as well, which is that little van that you might see above their avatar, and that just increases the draft effect that the rider is using. The rider has for about 30 seconds. So they're coming towards that dead zone.
How many of those do you have to use throughout the race, Carly? The power-ups.
So every time you cross that start-finish line, time you cross that start-finish line, you get if you don't have a power-up already in your little bank, then you get it goes through the roulette wheel for you to get another. And there are numerous ones that a rider could get. The lightweight feather, that's useful for the climb, as it makes you about 9.5 watts lighter for 15 seconds. Then there's the draft boost, which that's the van, and that increases the draft effect that they get by about 50% for 30 seconds. The aero boost, which is the helmet that you might see, that makes the rider more aerodynamic for a short period, which is really useful for a sprint. And then there's new ones that Swift just released not long ago, which is like the burrito. And that makes you undraftable for a short period. So if you're wanting to go for an attack and you have the burrito, you can drop that, and then no one can get any benefit from being on your wheel anyway. So it's a really good launching pad type power up. And the last one is
I like the idea. Keep going.
Ghost.
The what?
So the Ghost is the last one, which is like a cloaking device.
The ghosting.
So a rider can't see you if you're making a move for 10 seconds. So it's a way of like magically getting a gap up the road.
All right. I'd like to be able to use every single one of those power-ups at the one time. Which is obviously not an option, but geez, it'd be fun.
Yeah. I like the lightweight. The aero boost, the aerodynamic one isn't normally my favorite, I think, because I never am aerodynamic, and I never really am in a position where I'm sprinting either. So I try to make my move on the climb, and you're seeing a lot of people using that power up I was just talking about now as they're hitting the climb, and 26 kilometers in. So only a couple of laps now to go.
And you can see the pink colours up towards the front. This is the Sydney Uni Staminade team. They've been regularly towards the front with both Vicky Whitelaw and Georgia Whitehouse. They've got 4 riders in total still within this front group that I can spot. So as a team, at the very least, they've been riding well. And they've got themselves really strongly positioned. And we've been regularly on board as well with Taryn Heather, who's been riding pretty well and regularly up towards the front. Coming down to the last 4 kilometres of race. In fact, almost 4.5 kilometres of racing still to go. So we're getting down towards the business end. A little around about 5 and a bit minutes still to go. Matilda Reynolds is still in this very select group, and she's a super strong sprinter on the road, but let's see how she copes when it comes to doing it on Zwift. As they make this tight right-hand turn, they then straighten up. They'll be able to see the finish line. And as they go through this arch, that's the finish line that they'll be looking for when the clock is reading 31.9 kilometres.
Yeah, so they're just getting 2 laps to go now, and a lot of those riders, the Sydney Uni Staminade team moving up. You're seeing a lot of the SRAM kit as well, which is the Rotsalt Attacker team with Peter Mullins and Justine Barrow. And yeah, this is now definitely the final and important part of the race, the second to last climb. Here, I think we're going to see a few last-minute moves and some riders trying to get away.
I like the idea of that.
Taryn
It would be good
Heather.
to see. Taryn Heather is always a candidate to try and get away on a course like this, whether it's on Zwift or whether it's out on the road. Down to the last 2 laps in the opening round of the Cycling Australian National Road Series. This is on Zwift. We have the first of 6 rounds. It will be on every fortnight. This has been a great initiative that's been driven by Zwift. In particular, a lot of credit goes to Wes Salzberger, who works now for Zwift, and he said that he was a beneficiary of the Subaru National or the National Road Series many years ago when he was coming up through the ranks, and he didn't want to see the young riders in particular miss out. This is another move by the young Southern Australian. This is Bree once again, who is on the charge.
Yeah, riding for the Subaru Giant Racing team. She attacked earlier on and got a bit of a gap, and she's done the same move at the same point now. Look at that heart rate, 201 beats per minute, and she's opened up a really good gap. It's about 8 seconds now on those chasing riders, and if she comes across this finishing line coming up, it's only 1 lap to go now. So this is a really good move, about 2 kilometres left of the bike race.
Well, regardless of the outcome, she has caught my attention. This is the first time that I've really seen her in action. This has been really impressive, and regularly seen her heart rate at 200 or just over 200. She can certainly hold her head up high and let everybody know that she went full gas. This has been a magnificent effort.
Yeah, it has, and they're really trying to close that gap now. I think it's a couple seconds though, and yeah, it is pretty impressive actually. I agree. I think that she's definitely putting her hand up and trying to show like, hey, I've been training hard and I want to race, and yeah, this is a really good move by Bree.
For the Subaru Giant Racing team, Bree Playell is just ever so slightly off the front. Her gap is just 3 seconds. She'll come through the finish line and she'll get 1 lap to go, but the peloton, once again, they are breathing down her neck.
Yeah, you can see Tara and Heather doing a lot of work trying to close that down, and she just has a really great move, and this is the last time they're going to hit that climb for the day, and yeah, it's about 1.5 kilometers left of the bike race now, so a lot of those Sydney Uni Stamina riders up near the front as they're about to hit the climb for the last time.
Well, if we could, a most combative, most aggressive prize, you'd have to give it to Bree Playell. She has been outstanding. There have been 2 really big attacks, and we've regularly seen her heart rate above 200 beats per minute. That has been impressive. It's been great to watch. Over the cobblestones for the last time. And it's just about time to go on the attack again. It's those colours once again up towards the front. This is the Subaru Giant Racing team, but it's one of the teammates of Bree. No gap being opened up at the front of the race at this point. The tempo is simply too high to be able to get away.
Yeah, they're sitting at over 40 kilometers per hour now with under a kilometer to go. So we're coming into the sprint. There's about 500 meters to go left, and they're just going to hit that slight downhill before that final corner. So now definitely I think it's going to come down to a sprint.
And now the positioning is all important because it's difficult to come from a long way from behind, but you can't waste a whole heap of energy too early either. And you can see a few riders now starting to make a move. Again, this looks like the Subaru Giant team coming through to the front. Bree Vine is punching out some big numbers. She's up around the 6 watts per kilo, and she was one of your pre-race favourites. So this is looking good for your prediction, Carly Taylor. They make the right-hand turn. Yeah, it's the Sydney Uni Lemonade colours. Georgia Whitehouse at 10 watts. It could be a 1, 2, 3 for Sydney Uni Staminade. It is. They have dominated the race. Sydney Uni Staminade taking victory in round 1 of the National Road Series on Zwift. That has been a fantastic team performance.
Yeah, they rode so well, and we're just seeing a bit of a replay there, I think, when they're coming around that final corner. But yeah, they were all really well positioned and used those power-ups at a really good time. And yeah, you saw Georgia Whitehouse and Vicky Whitelaw being on that podium there.
So 2 of the most experienced in the race, showing that experience matters, whether it's on the road or on the home trainer in the garage racing on Zwift. Carly Taylor, it doesn't matter where you are, experience matters.
Yeah, it does help, especially because Zwift, you do have those gaming aspects with the power-ups, and yeah, knowing the course like any race is beneficial. So yeah, it was awesome to see some of the more experienced Zwifters use that to their advantage, and to see such a strong effort by the Sydney Uni Staminade as well. They had awesome numbers, 10 starters, and really worked to their advantage.
And we saw coming down to the final couple of laps, they still had 4 riders in the group. So it was Vicky Whitelaw who took out the win ahead of Georgia Whitehouse. Nicole Frame was in 3rd position, followed then by Bree Hargraves. Tess White was in 5th place. Bree Wilson, one of the riders you spoke about early on, was in 6th position. Race with me, Emily Watts from Sydney. She was in 7th position. Bree Vine, not surprisingly, inside the top 10 in 8th place. It was then Taryn Heather in 9th and Justine Barrow in 10th. So all of those riders inside the top 10, really experienced riders. The youngest that I can see amongst them is Emily Watts in 7th place. And the gap's all really tight amongst those in the top 10. But certainly Sydney Uni Staminade dominating at the top of the table. And Vicky Whitelaw and Georgia Whitehouse, two of the most experienced, taking 1st and 2nd place. They'll be delighted, Carly.
Yeah, and a really good ride by Emily Watts as well. Last week, I think she Everested on her weekend, trying to get the concept bike and just, doing something for a good cause as well. But, it's kind of good to see a few of those youngsters. She's an up-and-comer and did really well in the under-23 ranks in Ballarat. So awesome to see her also in the top 10. Up there, it was a pretty aggressive race.
Do you know how long it took her to do the Everesting?
I think it was around 12 hours. But then just thinking about that, she made it look pretty easy when she was videoing and doing a lot of her updates on her Instagram story. But I started thinking about that, and it's like 8.5 times up to Swift, which I do 1 and I finish pretty dead. So I can't imagine doing 2, let alone 8.5. But
you've got to run the filter through everything that you see. You've got to run the filter through all those things that you see on social media about things looking easy and things looking absolutely wonderful and everything being so perfect, because it's the edited version of people's experience. And there is nothing easy about Everesting, particularly if it takes 12 hours on a home trainer.
Yeah, it's a long time. Luckily, I guess you can set up your food station right next to you, and you don't have to deal with maybe some of the elements like the cold descent. But definitely, I think if Everesting is hard at the best of times, Everesting on a home trainer is definitely kudos to her for doing that.
It is impressive. Well, Carly, we've seen a great race. Any big surprises for you?
Not really. I think I thought Sydney Uni Staminade would do quite well. But I think maybe the Bree from the Subaru Giant Racing team, those moves that we saw from her today were pretty impressive, and I've seen her racing much before on Swift. So I think that was a really good ride by her, and she really did make probably some of the best attacks of the race today.
Yeah, the top 3 were no surprise because they were the kind of performances that you expect. But Bree Playell was the takeout for me with how aggressive she was multiple times, and seeing her heart rate regularly over 200. And that has to catch your attention and at the same time take your breath away. Carly, I've really enjoyed calling the race with you. This is only round 1. We've got 5 rounds to come. We'll be back every fortnight from now to follow the progress of the National Road Series. I look forward to calling the next round with you in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks for having me.
To everybody else, stick around. We're going to take a short break. At 10 o'clock, the men's race will be getting started. Pat Shaw and I will pick it up with a preview in just a couple of minutes' time. Stay with us.
Go ahead, boys and girls.
Matt, it's great to be here for the National Road Series virtual men's race after such a great women's race. I was able to catch it on the stream. What was it like calling the action?
Well, I did note, Pat, that you were making a few comments there whilst you were watching it. It was really impressive to see how aggressive it was. I'm looking forward to getting stuck into the start of the men's race. We're just a couple of minutes away from getting started. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, if you did miss the women's race, Sydney Uni dominated with Vicky Whitelaw and Georgia Whitehouse at the top of the table. This is the first of 6 rounds in the men's race, Pat. It's every fortnight. So it's a really good block of racing for the men. It gives them some structure. Likewise for the women each weekend. Saturday, the women starting at 9 o'clock, the men starting at 10 o'clock. And this course today, it is 16 laps, 31.9 kilometres around this course. It's got a little bit of a climb in it. There's a cobblestone section as well. But as we saw in the women's race, timing of using your effort is crucial.
Yeah, and it always is on Zwift. And power-up's crucial as well. Yes, executed perfectly by Sydney Uni Staminade, 1, 2, 3 in the stage. But you saw activity during the stage too. We can expect to see a lot of attacks on this course, particularly off the pave section where there's almost a 4% incline. It's short, it's sweet, but gee, will it do some damage?
Have you got any favourites? Taking a look at the start list, because it's not exactly the same as looking at a start list in a normal race as it is on Zwift, because there are a few other elements. And I certainly thought that before the women's race. Yet in the women's race, the 2 winners, or the top 2 place getters, were 2 of the most experienced women that I've seen racing over the last 10 or 15 years. And they transferred that to this platform.
Yes, well, certainly because of the lockdown, essentially, we've seen a lot more of these riders spending time on Zwift. So there's a lot more experience in this peloton than what we would have expected 35, 40 days ago. I think the same players we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at the Cam Roberts, the Zach Johnsons, the Trekkie Johnson, which I think we're going to catch up with a bit of information on Brendan later on. Obviously, he won the Melbourne Warrnambool in 2020, so exciting rider to watch. And although some of these riders aren't electrifyingly quick in a sprint finish in real life, their power distribution is fantastic. And that's really what you need, particularly on a course like today. Yes, it's a flatter course today with a slight rise in it, but this series really has a course for every type of rider, including an individual time trial of 8 kilometres. It's going to be exciting to see. Who do I think can take the win today? Either Taj Jones from ARA Pro Cycling Sunshine Coast or my man, Nick White.
I thought you were going to mention Nick White. I was going to hold my breath and wait for it because I knew it wasn't going to take all that long. It was always going to come up, Pat.
I think if you have a look over the past weeks, particularly in the Chop series, which they've been racing phenomenally as they now head out of the pen, and we're watching Ryan Thomas now. We're just on Ben Hill a moment ago. Ryan Thomas, teammate of Taj Jones, he could be a pivotal part of today's plan. And that's also going to be another part of it, Matt, is how do the tactics play out? I saw in the women's race, it was pretty much a fierce pressure always put on. We saw some comments about riders being lapped. Oh, why aren't they pulled out? I'd like to say straight away, if you get dropped on Zwift, you ain't assisting anyone after that.
Good to see the name of Joe Cooper appearing up towards the front, the Kiwi rider. He's shown himself towards the front. So too Nick White from Team Bridge Lane at the front, just moments after you mentioned him. And also saw popping up towards the front of the race, Graeme Frisley, who's from the Cycling Club, who was pretty good last weekend in the Anzac Classic.
Yes, certainly was. And what a turnout it was, over almost 1,000, should I say, riders that physically got on the bikes, but over 1,000 that subscribed to participate. Some of the young riders I wanted to just point out, we've actually got dual Australian champion in the under-19s in the field today, who won the Criterium and also won the road race, Declan Tresize, from up in Queensland, in northern Queensland. And I really would like to see how he goes today. The under-19 riders are of particular interest because the National Road Series now allows the teams in the series to have 2 riders on stagiaires at the end of the season. This allows a rider in the under-19 program to come up and race in the National Road Series with the under-23s and elite riders without consuming a position for that team in a race. So if a team can have 6 riders, it can now have 8 in the last few races of the year. It can have 8 riders, 6 of their normal team, plus 1 or 2 under-19 riders in which they can stagiaire for the remainder of the season. So that's a fantastic initiative that Cycling Australia's put forward. And I think this platform that we have here in the virtual National Road Series will allow teams to select these under-19 riders accordingly for that program.
That can make a huge difference. And on the topic of under-19s, you look at the Inform Make team, and they've got Pat Eddy on their squad, who in the under-19s in 2019 dominated, winning the time trial and the road race. And he's still in the under-19s. He's a guy who has got enormous potential. And luckily for him, this is happening in 2020 as opposed to 2023. Be hoping that, I certainly hope anyway, that he's able to make a transition through into the World Tour, because he's a guy with a big future ahead of him. And I'm looking forward to seeing how he goes on this platform. Here's Trekkie, Brendan Johnson, great mountain biker, winner of the Melbourne to Warrnambool. Yes, I can feel your pain. How you travelling? Can you talk to us?
I can talk, Gus, but I think this will be the last cross that we're on air for. My God.
Looks tough, and it is tough. I mean, the thing with the Zwift races, though, they come out of the blocks. One particular thing about the athlete we're looking at there, Brendan Johnson, 2020 Melbourne to Warrnambool winner, is that he is such a strong rider. He can put up with pain. Coming from a mountain bike background, this isn't an issue for him. He's just putting on a bit of a play there, I think. He's one of the favourites for today as well. The difficulty with this course is the sheer speed. We saw the women covered the distance in 41 minutes or a little bit there over. The men, we suspect, will be around the 36 to 37 minute mark. They race this course quite often over this similar distance. And last week, similar field, less in size obviously, and not quite as dense with talent, did it in 37 minutes 20. So we'll be looking around that 36 to 37 and a half minutes. We can see Mark O'Brien up the front there as we still stay on Trekkie Johnson from the Canberra cycling team. He's really had a great season, albeit cut short, and I think he'll be looking to stamp some authority on this series as well, Matt.
I love how he owns the nickname. He's riding at 175 beats per minute, and you can see that it is Trekkie that he is listed here as, not as Brendan Johnson. His Twitter handle is Trekkie as well. And before we got started with the women's race and things were getting organised with Brendan Johnson, Carly Taylor and I were having a conversation with Nathan Guerra, who's based over in Chicago, about Trekkie. And it was a case of Carly at one point saying that there was an incident where she was having to mention his name to somebody, but she'd drawn a blank and couldn't remember his real name. Just knew him as Trekkie, and she had to search Trekkie to find Brendan Johnson's real name.
Yes, well, that's what happens when you have a nickname that really stands out in the crowd, and he loves it. He gets called by it. We can see a little bit of a split here already, Matt, and this is what happens in Zwift. You leave a little bit of a gap and you can be left behind. Look at the power-ups being popped. That's the van. That's the draft boost. So that offers a draft similar to that behind a van from the rider in front of you. So a lot of riders popping those. Also strategic, though. I must say, in this finish today, you're definitely going to want the aero power-up. Now, I think Carly elaborated earlier, every time you pass the start-finish line, you'll collect a power-up as long as you don't have one already in your possession. And that aero power-up will be the one that people want. On this course, the feather power-up, the lightweight, it's not really worth much. But what I was talking about is those people with the van power-up, they'll be sort of using it. Yes, it's assisting them right now, but they're kind of discarding that power-up, hoping that they'll cross the finish line, pick up the aero power-up. Once you get the aero power-up, then it's a question. Do you run the risk of using it early in the race and maybe getting another one towards the end, or do you hold on it the whole way? When I raced quite a lot on Zwift, I would hold on to it. I wouldn't run the risk of losing that for the finish because it's just too good of a power-up. 15 seconds of improved aerodynamics the aero helmet allows you. And as Carly also alluded to, there's 2 new power-ups on Zwift now. The Burrito, which allows no draft from the riders behind you, so it's a good way to split the field. And secondly, that new power-up, Ghost power-up, is phenomenal. And we will see that in effect today, hands down guaranteed.
Yeah, I'm loving all the power-ups, and I love the initiative of the Burrito. But I also like on this format our ability to take a look at the heart rate of various riders. We're now on board with Bree Vine, and he's sitting at 168 beats per minute. Just before that, we were on board with Taj Jones from the ARA Sunshine Coast team, the rider that you mentioned as one of the favourites, and his heart rate was 196. Bree Vine, though, a guy who finished in 5th place in the Jayco Herald Sun Tour this year. This is a format, Pat Shaw, that he knows really, really well. He has spent a lot of time on Zwift.
Yes, well, he's had a lot of time on Zwift, but how was his summer? I mean, 3rd overall in the general classification New Zealand Cycle Classic, 3rd on the Queen Stage up Mount Buller in the Jayco Herald Sun Tour, and finished 5th overall, and he fought all the way to the line to try and secure that place against another rider that we might see on Zwift later in the year, Jesse Ewart, who ended up slipping down that 1 position on the final stage. They sprinted it out on all the intermediate sprints. Very impressed with him over the summer. He is a quality athlete on Zwift. I think he finished 2nd in the chop just 2 nights ago to Nick White, scratch or A grade. They did catch the field that night. 370 watt average, I think, was the average for almost 40 minutes. So significant hit out for those riders, Matt. And I think he's definitely a player to watch. We saw Marcus Curley just fleeting back in the pack there, 3rd in the National Road Championship in January, and probably one of our favourite rides of the day there. Guy Karma is right in there. Bill Simpson, one of the young Melbourne prodigies coming up through the ranks, more noted for his track cycling, and struggles a little bit on the road. But this probably does gauge just slightly to the benefit of those riders that are good on the track. This field really getting small already.
It's getting small really, really quickly. Marcus Curley up towards the front from the St. George Continental team. He's a guy who was so impressive at the National Championships. That bronze medal that he collected in the road race, that was one that for a lot of people that hadn't seen him race previously and some of the performances that he'd put in, particularly around the Asian circuit, they were probably caught by surprise. And I'd seen a bit of Marcus Curley, but even I was caught a little bit by surprise. I thought a top 10, yeah, but that bronze medal, I thought it was outstanding, and full credit to him. It was one of the rides of the weekend.
Oh, certainly. It was deserved for him. Just jokingly, we might just have a look at the top of the screen. We're all going to have to get our mathematics hats on because we're in miles per hour and also miles distance and feet. Thanks to that from our producer, Nathan Guerra. He loves to throw that curveball out on us occasionally, but that's all right. We've got plenty of time to go. 1.6, you want to times all those figures by. That'll get you your particular kilometres travelled and speed per hour. Like I said, 36 minutes or thereabouts, we will see the riders cover this race today. It'll be ultra aggressive in the back end, Matt. This front end's just about sorting the field out, and already some great results have come from that because the field is about half of its actual size it was when it left the pen just, 11 minutes ago.
Yeah, and I saw this last weekend with the Anzac event. Admittedly, as you mentioned before, it's a big disparity in terms of the abilities in that event with some World Tour riders and a whole bunch of people that are out there doing a recreational ride, but it thinned out really quickly in that event. And everybody that I've spoken to about how difficult it is racing in this format, they talk about how tough the first 10 minutes are and then trying to settle into a rhythm. And as we're on board with various riders, and you're constantly seeing heart rates of 170 is a low range heart rate, and every now and then we're seeing up towards the 185, 190, and in the women's race we regularly saw 200 beats per minute.
Yes, well, we're on board with Cam Roberts here, and Cam Roberts is one of probably the most frequent riders on Zwift. He's 25 years of age. He's Zwift level 43. He won the SRAM Senate Series last year. He's ridden over 18,000 kilometres on Zwift, believe it or not, with 162,000 metres vertical gain, Matt. So he knows every ounce of these roads. And to be honest, he's incredibly successful regardless of which events he's in. So one of the really experienced riders. He'll be looking to really get his GPM team up there on the leaderboard after stage one. But another rider from their team has to be, he's a mountain biker prodigy. He's been fantastic in criterium racing in particular. Cam Ivory, two-time winner of the Stan Shaker Memorial down in Tasmania in a really difficult course. And he's another rider from the GPM Stultz team that I think could probably produce something good in this series as a whole. The 8-kilometre time trial with an uphill 2 kilometres at the finish will really suit him also.
Mark O'Brien at the front. He's already been on Zwift this morning, Mark O'Brien, participating in a race. He's already ridden a race this morning as a warm-up for this. A group of my mates that normally ride together on a Saturday morning, they've been doing a bunch ride or participating in a Zwift race on a Saturday morning because you can't do a bunch ride at the moment, particularly in Victoria. So they did a race this morning and they were all boasting on the WhatsApp group that we've got as a bunch of mates about the fact that they were in the group with Mark O'Brien. So I've just taken a screenshot and sent it to them. Marco was only warming up. He's in the National Road Race Series on Zwift now, and he's at the front, and he's punching out 4.5 watts per kilo.
Yes, and he's certainly going to like probably more of the races in stage 3 and 4 where it's more of a hillier race. This terrain still, he'll be good because he's quite a strong rider even on the flat, which you don't usually find from riders that are, you know, notable climbers. But Mark O'Brien, he has got that ability to really hold a sustained pace and power, and he's a difficult rider to bring unstuck and get rid of. So he'll be really good on this course for his teammates in particular. You spoke about Pat Addy from the under-19s. He's part of that Inform Racing team as well. Cam Ivory, we just see him pop up on the screen there. Young rider Henry Dietz. Angus Lyons also in there, Sean Whitfield. There's some really strong riders still in here. Graeme Frisley, you mentioned him earlier, so he's still amongst this front group as well. Pretty quick, Graeme Frisley, but in the past on Zwift, we've seen him come unstuck a little bit in the final kilometres just because of the extended pressure of the intensity of these races. They're about 12 kilometres into the stage at the moment, so about 19 kilometres to go, Matt, and it's pretty fast paced. 12 Ks covered in 14 and a half minutes.
Yeah, it is flying. So we're currently seeing this in miles, and my quick calculation is that this race will finish at 19.8 miles. So hopefully we can get this switched across to kilometres by the end of the race, but nonetheless, we'll keep on track with it as we see Jesse Fentonby in the green colours of Oliver's Real Food Racing come up towards the front. One of his teammates you mentioned a moment ago of Angus Lyons, he's also in those green colours of Oliver's Real Food Racing. I imagine, Pat, that given that Angus Lyons is in Ballarat, that coming into this time of year, Zwift would be coming into its own as a training platform.
Yes, well, for the Ballarat locals, Zwift is a natural attraction at this time of the year. And I tell you what, Matt, at the moment in Victoria, wow, are we having some cold, chilly times. The last 3 days have been phenomenally freezing. So perfect conditions for Zwift. But there's a pretty strong Ballarat contingent in here today. Nick White, Liam White, we've got Jesse Norton, we've got Angus Lyons. We've also got other riders in there as well that are really starting to push themselves into the National Road Series and want to sort of dip their toe in this National Road Series online before going out and having a real crack out in the real life racing. This looks like it's Joe Cooper now. He's not scared to get on the front. He's out and pushing the watts. 400 watts, no, mind you, 166 beats per minute. Knowing Joe, his cadence actually pretty high for Joe, 96. He's noted for having that lower cadence. He has spent a bit of time on Zwift, but he's not the most experienced, so we keep an eye on him. He's definitely going to be one to watch for the time trial stage.
He's a former teammate of yours. He's a former Kiwi national champion, particularly in the time trial, and a winner of the National Road Series. And he was the first New Zealander to win the National Road Series. Paddy Bevan was the second Kiwi to win it before moving on to ride with the team that we now know as EF Education First, and then across to BMC, which we now know as CCC. And it was great last week, Pat, to see Paddy Bevan participate in the Anzac ride.
Yes, it was fantastic to see him on for the Anzac ride, but we've seen Paddy Bevan nearly on every day. I was watching him yesterday while we were at the shop. We were just following around, seeing what sort of training he was up to. He was actually on a pretty easy day, it seemed. But back to the racing here, still no real surge of pace, but the constant power, Matt. No one really getting off the front, but we haven't seen much below that 350 watts. We go back to Trekkie. He's looking pretty good. He doesn't look too out of ways, but how you feeling, mate?
Yeah, settled in a bit more now. The starts and these are so hard. But once you settle in and find the points on the course where you got to put the effort in to sort of maintain position, yeah, you can settle down a little bit, but as you can tell, it's certainly not easy to get away.
We can hear you clicking down. We can hear you clicking down the gears, trying to stay with the surge of pace, leave the cadence down a bit as you surge off the seat. We'll let you get back to it. It'll be interesting to see whether we will see Trekkie have an attack later on, or does he just play the cards right and just go for a top 5 today, and if things go right, still get the win in the sprint, because it's going to be the most consistent riders and the most consistent teams in the series. Earlier in the day, we saw in the women's series, Sydney Uni Staminate taking 1, 2, 3. That really helps them for cards to play later in the series.
What I really noticed, Pat, then with Trekkie, Brendan Johnson, was how high his fan was on, because he's got the team jersey on and their hair was blowing, and it looked as if it was blowing in the breeze, because that fan must be on 3, and it must be a nice big fan to try and keep the engine cool, because that's one thing that does happen in this format is you do build up a pretty big sweat and it's easy to overcook the engine.
Oh, certainly. It's very easy to overcook the engine, particularly for people like yourself and I, Matt. But for Trekkie and the like, I think that they're finding this pressure now. The riders that have made this initial split, should I say, they are finding these conditions a lot easier for them now, because it's like a bit like the Bay Criterium series, actually, that once you make through that first 15 minutes, you're pretty good, because the intensity doesn't really lift. Everyone's fairly fatigued, so if someone does attack, everyone's going to feel that same amount of pain. And actually, the intensity has been absolutely electrifying so far.
I was impressed with the fact that Trekkie was able to have any sort of conversation with us at all. And he said that it's settled down now, I've found my rhythm. His heart rate was 176 beats per minute as he said that.
Yes, yeah, but that's pretty standard for him. You know, he's fit guys. It's not you or me that gets on the bike a few days a week, Matt. These guys are on 7 days a week, training programs. They're ready for this racing, and it's Ben Van Dam that finds himself on the front for Team Bridge Lane. And if you're wondering how you can tell the teams apart, they've all got their own jerseys. Some teams have got, I think Oliver's Real Foods is one of the teams that has their official jersey because they've been part of series in the past, but all of the other teams have been designated a particular jersey out of the Zwift clothing closet. They can pay drops to get those if they want to upgrade to different jerseys, but they've been all allocated. So each team you'll see has the same jersey. So in the blue jerseys, we see they're all the same team, and that's how we're going to decipher the differences when we get down towards the pointy end. 17 kilometres have been completed.
B Hill for Bridge Lane, riding up towards the front. No doubt, Pat, you've seen some of the footage from in his kitchen where he's been doing some of these events, and his partner Beck Wysack, who's a dual world champion on the track, mind you, in the individual pursuit, has been filming him sprinting and winning a few of the races. It's been great footage from inside the house.
It's been great footage for us to watch, but it hasn't been a great experience for him. He's a guy that just cannot give in. He just loves the fight. The harder it is, the more enjoyable for him. And I think that we're going to see some really strong performances from him during this series, as we now see Joe Cooper. He's having a second chance off the front. The accelerations are important to get the gaps. But also, if you could get, I reckon if Joe Cooper could get the ghost boost, that would be a phenomenal one for him. 10 seconds invisibility from the field. They can't see you during that 10 seconds you use that power up, and that would probably give him the ability to get 4 or 5 seconds up the road. He'll be a difficult rider to bring back.
And that was Matt Zenovich that was going off the front. He's had a bit of support from those who are watching the live stream online. You can watch this via the YouTube channel or live streaming on Zwift Community Live. And it's good to see plenty of people that are tuning on there. And we've even got Wendy Superfan tuning into the live broadcast. So it's great to see that there's so many people who are watching the broadcast of this, the first of 6 rounds of the National Road Series.
Yes, it's going to be an exciting one. We just saw Ben Hill popping up there as well from Team Bridge Lane. He's another rider that spends, you spoke about him before, spends a lot of time on Zwift. He's 30 years of age, Zwift level 31. 2017, he won Tour of Tochigi. I always try to call it Togochi, I don't know. And in 2016, he won the Tour of Thailand. He's an impressive rider. We notably see him going for sprint classifications and King of the Mountains jerseys. Ridden over 8,000 kilometres on Zwift and an elevation gain of over 75,000 metres. Loves it. And an interesting stat there too, he's burnt 559 slices of pizza in those 8,000 kilometres, Matt. I don't know how many pieces of pizza he's eaten, but I'd probably say more than the 559.
I love that pizza burn measure. I think that is absolutely sensational. A name that just popped up on the screen was that of Jordan Kirby, a world champion on the track in the individual pursuit, now part of the New Zealand national team, targeting the Olympic Games in Tokyo 2021. He's a guy that this format could really work for Jordan Kirby.
Well, I think he's really going to be a powerhouse. He's although we've got quite a steep finish on the time trial, he's really going to be one that's going to have a fast time checked at least to the bottom of the climb. And it's hard to know where the riders are at fitness-wise, particularly those that are in search of Olympic glory. But one would suggest that he'd still be in a pretty good situation. Here's the Pave section. This is where attacks can be launched from the smarter riders. Now, when I say smarter, it's because they know the course. Also, just before we saw Declan Tresize pop up, Matt, I spoke about him earlier. Under-19 road champion and criterium champion in Ballarat earlier in the year, and really excited to see his development. He's been one of those ones that sort of sits in the shadows for a few years, but he's really popped up and really improved. He's now measuring up against guys like Pat Eddy as one of the leaders in that National Road Series for the under-19s. I'm really interested to see how that plays out. As I spoke about earlier, teams can take these riders on as stagiaires now, and they can take them as extra riders into the real life racing. So great advantages there for teams if they pick up these riders before someone else.
He's got a really good racing brain as well, Declan Tresize. We saw that at the National Championships in both the Road Racer and the Criterium, in the manner in which he took them out. On board once again with Joe Cooper, heart rate 165, punching out 500 watts. It's a sign of the power. Cameron Ivory up towards the front. Liam White also ever present towards the head of the race. And Jay Vine, who you've mentioned a few times as a guy to watch on this format, who had a pretty good summer, Jay Vine, particularly at the Jayco Herald Sun Tour.
Yeah, he certainly did. A rider that's sneaking in the pack, Matt, is Michael Freeburg. He's not showing himself too much, but I have seen him popping up. He's just about 12th or 13th wheel there next to Dominic Di Domenico, and he can be one to watch for certain. He has a long, progressive sprint. He's one of our riders to watch for the day, Michael Freeburg, as we're watching him now from the ARA Pro Cycling Sunshine Coast. Beautiful to see the actual jersey there too and the close-up. He's been a phenomenal rider and obviously was the road race champion of Australia in 2019. Finished top 20 in the Anzac Classic last weekend that we were covering. Over 1,000 riders were subscribed for that. He's done about 592 kilometres on Zwift, so he was doing a fair bit on Zwift back about 2 years ago, and then he's got back off it, but now he's really excited to do something in this series. So be interesting to see what the 29-year-old can offer, but he's certainly one of our favourites to watch today.
Oh, he's got the horsepower for this format, and what a fantastic team, ARA Pro Racing Sunshine Coast. They've got a few youngsters on the team. They've got a guy like Zach Gilmore as well, Taj Jones, who you've spoken about a lot, and I know you're a big rap for him and his sprinting ability. Matt Rice as well, who's really quick. Alistair Donahue is in this race for that team. But Michael Freeburg, I think from that squad, will certainly be one to watch. And he's been quiet near the front, keeping himself out of trouble, so to speak. Not that there's any risk of crashing, but just not wasting any energy with early attacks. On board now with Jordan Kirby.
Yes, and
He's
on
looking
now
good,
Nick
Jordan
White.
Kirby.
We've got. Yes, he looks good too. Yes, but there's this little split off the front. It's not too much to be worried about at this point. Looks like we've got around about 35 riders left in this front selection. Jack Aiken, right at the back of the pack in that white jersey. He's an interesting rider to watch. He's really strong in the time trial sort of side of the sport, or the solo breakaways. He loves to put himself under pressure. He will be in his element in the harder courses, but a late attack on the cobbled section could see him really stitch a few up in this group. The difficult thing is they've backed the pace off ever so slightly in the peloton. You think you're getting this false sense of security. I'm feeling good. All of a sudden, surge comes, 6 or 7 roll off the front, and it's difficult to bring them back.
Yep, Trekkie Johnson. He's the rider that we're following now. We've been in the garage with him a couple of times. His heart rate is going up a little bit. Starting to test the legs a bit more now for Trekkie. Travis Stewart is also out there. Good to see Travis out there in amongst this field. A group of riders about to be lapped. And as you mentioned earlier on, Pat, if you're getting lapped on this course, there's not too many opportunities for you to get back into the leading group and be able to support a teammate. If you're a lap down, you're cooked.
Yes, you go a lap down for a very good reason. I used to say that to people myself. They say, oh, why won't you work in second group? I'm in second group for a very good reason. If I was feeling good, I'd be in first group. So it's a very similar situation on Zwift. If you are getting lapped, fair to say you've cooked the goose a little bit, but the good thing about the series is you don't have to worry. You're back in the group next fortnight. We'll be here every second Saturday for the men's and women's National Road Series. And I just got to say a big shout out to everyone involved in getting this series off the ground, Matt. I'm sure you agree that this really fills a big gap for the development of our young riders, and particularly also the sponsors of the teams in the National Road Series in Australia. So fantastic as Zwift, Cycling Australia, and also all of the partners involved. It's fantastic to be here to cover it as well. You know how passionate we both are about the National Road Series and its development process that it allows riders to progress in the sport, but also for some of the riders that don't have that ideal, they don't want to progress in the sport, but they'd love to race at an elite level while working full time.
It's brilliant. And from a personal perspective, I'm commentating from my home and I've still got my tracksuit pants on and I've just put on the appropriate polo shirt with the Zwift logos on it. It's like the news reporter who goes into work with the business up top and he's got the thongs and the boardies down underneath the desk. This is the way to work. I'm loving it. And Tyler Lindorf, he's loving it as well because he's putting the pressure on at the front.
Yes, now Tyler Lindorf, he's an interesting rider to speak about, Matt. He's really one I want to keep an eye on for the future. He's had some pretty awful setbacks. Every time this kid gets in good form, he gets some bad luck. He had a crash in the Tour Down Under, should I say, when he was looking really, really good in a great position. That was poor luck. He had another crash not too long after that caused him an injury that put him out, and he was just finding his legs again. He's a phenomenal young athlete, and he's actually very versatile as well. He can time trial, and he can read a bike race. It's not something that you see all that much, that rider IQ. So he's one to watch going forward. Michael Freeburg now pops up, and this is the thing about these riders that have got a lot of talent and a lot of experience. You don't see them all day, mate. You just see them when it matters. And at the moment, we're looking at about the 23-kilometre mark, around 8 kilometres to go. At the top of the screen, we're looking in miles if you're confused. And but 31 minutes of racing, and we're expecting this race to take around 38 minutes.
Yeah, so we are getting down towards the business end of the race. The front end of the peloton has been thinned out significantly. More than 60 riders on the start line, and we're down to about half of that still in contention. A few riders have been lapped so far. Plenty of those green colours, though, Pat, from Oliver's Real Food Racing, and it's good to see so many of them towards the front. In fact, just on the screen now, I can spot 5 riders from Oliver's Real Food Racing.
Yes, well, the interesting thing about Oliver's Real Foods Racing, in the series, you're allowed to register 12 riders, in which up to 10 can compete in any of the 6 stages. Oliver's Real Foods team had 17 riders that put their hand up to do the series. So 5 of their riders had to miss out because they wanted to do it so badly. So you're going to see they really race this well, because if they don't, well, the 5 riders that missed out, Matt, they're going to be at home going, hey, Rider 7, Rider 8, what was your go? I could have filled that gap and done better. So it's really great to see, and they're a team we're both very fond of because they always animate the racing. Sam Lazell, the team director sportif and manager of the team, is a really great supporter of all of the racing in Australia, and he also supports young riders as well. He's already got one under-19 rider on as a stagiaire, and he's looking for his second rider towards the end of the year. So it's great to see that Oliver's Real Foods, they've got big numbers here, but can they pull off a great result? Maybe Liam White or Sean Whitfield fast on the line, or Jesse Featonby could go long.
And we're getting down towards the business end of the race. This will be roughly a 19.8 mile race. So we're a little over 2 miles remaining, 3.6 to 3.8 kilometres still to go. They're down to the final 2 laps. We're with Jesse Featonby from Oliver's Real Food Racing, and with a heart rate of 172 beats per minute. I'm not sure what his max is, Pat, but that looks to be relatively comfortable given the context of how deep into the race we are.
Yes, and every time we get into this section here, this is where we're going to see the surge of pace. Let's remember, 200 metres to go. There is a hairpin corner. Now, it probably doesn't sound like too much because you're in virtual racing, and people at home are thinking, well, in real life, you'd want to be 3rd or 4th wheel coming off your lead-out train. Well, in Zwift, it's not too much different to that. You'd probably want to be in the first 6 or 7, because as you take the corner, by the time you come out of the corner, you're still that 10 metres behind the front rider, giving you, well, exactly 190 metres to catch that 10. And as we know, as sand through the hourglass, it gets harder by the metre that you pass. So it'll be interesting to see those riders that come down the line. Very interesting to see, it looks like Cameron Ivory that is using that aero power up, an odd time to be using that one for mine. He should have saved that for the finish. And he is one that I've been talking about as a rider that could really do well in this series. Here's the finishing banner. Must be about 2 laps to go, is it, Matt?
Oh, I think this might be the bell lap.
2 laps to go.
1 mile to go, or 2 laps to go. We've got 2 laps to go at this point. So we're getting right down to the back end of the race. On with Trekkie Johnson, the winner last year of the Melbourne to Warrnambool. We've been in the garage with him a few times, and their hair... 1 lap to go. We're on to the final lap.
Yep.
Michael Freeburg.
Bell lap.
We're inside the last lap. Less than 2 kilometres remaining. So next time they go through that arch, we will discover the winner. Michael Freeburg has shown himself up towards the front. Trekkie Johnson now, 177 beats per minute. Their hair is starting to flap in the breeze. He's going to be looking for an option towards the front. And Pat Shaw, Trekkie, is in with a big chance.
He certainly is. He looks good. He's concentrated. That's what you've got to do. Ride the wave of the peloton. Save his aero power up if he has that. Use that at the right time. He knows he's going to get 15 seconds of assistance with that, which should by rights get him through that hairpin all the way to the finish. So a quick acceleration into the hairpin. Bang, aero power up and sweet sprint to the finish. Mind you, if you've got a rider behind you that's still getting a draft and they pop that aero power up just moments later, they will come at you hard on the line. So it's going to be a fantastic finish. Select group of riders. Great to see a couple of the under-19 still in here. And notably, Declan Trezise. Also, Pat Eddy was there. Can't see him right at the moment. But another rider, we spoke about him earlier, track experience, is the rider there, Graeme Frisley. Alistair McCullough, we're looking at him now from ARA Pro Racing Sunshine Coast.
We've seen a lot of work on the front by his teammate, Michael Freeburg. Now it's Oliver's Real Food Racing at the front, Pat. This is Liam White, who's using his power up at the right time, 10 watts per kilo.
He's dragging Nick White, brotherly love, away.
Round the last corner, this is Nick White who's at the front. Graeme Frisley is providing the challenge. This is a big sprint through to the finish line. Is this Frisley who gets there? White kicks the clutch in. We'll wait for confirmation of the results. Nick White, though, opening up that sprint early, getting through that last corner with his nose in front after having chased down his brother. I'd love to know how far they were in terms of actual physical separation. You might know the answer to that, Pat.
Well, because of COVID restrictions, 1.5 meters, of course, Matt, but not much more. They'll be in the garage together at home, and they will be absolutely puffing their lungs out now. But as we see the replay, it was Frisley that timed it to perfection. As I said, if you get in that slipstream, and he did, he got perfectly in that slipstream, came over the top of our pre-race favourite, Nick White, who finishes in second. And Graeme Frisley, well, he's knocked out a great win here, and that's for the team of Subaru Giant. So they've done a great day today. 7th in the women's race with Emily Watts, and 5th in there with Bree Hargrave, should I say. So that was a great result for them earlier in the Women's Road Series, but now we see the big win. This will be a big day for them as a team, Matt.
That's a fantastic result. He's still really young, Graeme Frisley. He's only recently out of the under-19s. I've seen a fair bit of him racing the track at club level in the northern suburbs of Melbourne, out at Disc, out at the Brunswick Velodrome as well. He's always had a really good attitude, and he's been at that Brunswick Cycling Club coming through with a generation that includes Sarah Gigante and Luke Platt. So he's been surrounded by high achievers. And as a result of that, he's been just a little bit in the shadows. But this is a big step out. Look at some of the people that he's beaten in the race today and the manner in which he just timed his run to perfection, waiting for that moment to pounce to get over the top of Nick White. And Nick White, you tipped him as one of the favourites for good reason. He finished in second position, so you weren't far off the mark. This is a huge result for Graeme Frisley.
Certainly, and it just shows his ability, and this course is probably the perfect one for him. But we've got to remember they did 36 minutes of around 380 watts average power, so significant power required to get to the end. So it shows his endurance is really improving as well. Love to see how he continues in the series, but he'll take the virtual leaders jersey, which will be presented to him once he logs off, I guess. He'll wear that next stage. It's fantastic that they've got those abilities to give them the leaders jersey as well. We'll look forward to doing that for next stage in 2 weeks' time, but a totally different stage that will be. It's quite a difficult one, that one. I can't see Graeme taking the win on that one. A recap of the results, Matt.
Let's take a look. Graeme Frisley getting the win ahead of Nick White. It was then Bree Vine, one of the favourites for the series overall, in third position. One of the rising stars of Australian cycling, under-19 Australian road and time trial champion from 2 years ago, Pat Eddy in fourth place. Harley Moore in fifth position. Will Golding in sixth. Cam Roberts, one of the pre-race favourites, in seventh. Ben Van Dam, who is very active, in eighth position. Ben Hill in ninth place. And Alistair Donahue. Been a tough season for Alistair with the postponement of the Paralympics, in 10th place, but he's shown plenty of resolve by racing well here today. That's a solid result for Alistair Donahue. But Pat, I can't speak highly enough of Graeme Frisley. When his name was popping up early on in the race, I thought, I'm going to make sure I get in a mention here of Graeme Frisley, because I think he's got a pretty big future ahead of him. I'm not sure whether he's good enough to win the race today, though. But I was wrong. It was worth getting the mention. Yeah, well, he was good enough to win.
Well, he was there at the pointy end, Matt, and he's got an incredible power that he can put out. And today, pure power beats power to weight ratio. So later in the series, when we see the more difficult courses, power to weight becomes more recognisable as a guide to picking the winner. But today, pure power, and well, we saw the powerful riders at the front. Graeme Frisley takes the win, Nick White in second. But Bree Vine, he's kept himself in touch with that third place in a flat course. We'll see him come to the front when it gets a bit hillier.
Is he your favourite for the series?
I think there's a couple of guys that can do it. Cam Roberts really sticks out for me. Again, Nick White, he's so confident even in the hillier races. The time trial is probably going to be the separation because we're going to see some new faces, and collecting points on that stage will be really crucial for the overall series. It's going to be the rider that is the most consistent, not only winning stages, but just being up there consistently week in, week out, or fortnight in, fortnight out.
Yeah, well, it was a great start to the series, as Pat just mentioned, fortnight in, fortnight out. This is the first of 6 rounds of the series. We're back in a fortnight's time. It will be the women at 9 o'clock, the men at 10 o'clock. Thanks to Carly Taylor for joining me for the women's race, Pat Shaw for the men's race, and we look forward to you all join us once again in a fortnight's time for the second round of the National Road Series right here on Zwift.